PVC, I've got magnets on the line, I've got the fuel heater.
Right.
I did everything that was said in the book. I followed the book right to the letter.
Great.
And the only thing I need to do now to my Anthony board is to get a very strong rare earth magnet, which
Right.
I didn't put in yet. When I
Right.
do that, I know that you can get
Right.
a better explosion, because we want to get to that plasma type state. The closer we get to a plasma state, you know, I'm agreeing with everything that everybody said so far, but again, I think it all works in combination.
It's absolutely. Sure.
It's not one thing that gave me that huge increase.
That's right.
Plus, I'm also putting the acetone, I'm putting the xylol, and I'm putting the GP7 torque up.
Right.
All
Now,
that's going in the engine.
Yeah, acetone, really phase out of acetone, guys.
Only a little bit.
I know, no, even a little bit. It interacts with the alcohol. Before pre-alcohol, there was no problem. We used acetone since the 60s, okay? But when you start using acetone with alcohol, it dramatically starts affecting seal life. So just as a word of caution with acetone, that you're going to be affecting seal life long term. But the xylene, I've never seen any data that the xylene has just been 2 ounces per 10 gallons. Is that what all of us pretty much are agreeing on now for the xylene in the gasoline? Really is an effective way of breaking up long chain molecules. We have garbage gas today. We had great gas in the 50s and 60s. I'm old school, okay? I mean, I built the first hydro unit in 1976, so, I'm old school. I mean, I haven't done any of this stuff in a long, long time. So, I've been a missionary for 20 years. So, I mean, really, in the mission field, we did mostly solar and geothermal and hydro. That's where I've focused most of my energy on. So, but when you're looking at the hydrocarbon chain of the 50s and 60s, it was 12, 13 hydrocarbons long. It fit in the engine. That's basically what it boiled down to. But when they went to the garbage gas, that's when they had to go to a catalytic converter, because you're burning much less than 50% of your gasoline in your engine. The rest burns in your catalytic converter. I call it the catalytic perverter.
Sorry?
I want to know something about your electrolysis solution.
Okay.
Because I heard some people using so many different.
He wants to know about my electrolytic solution that I use in the brute force electrolyzer. There's a few different electrolytes that you can add to distilled water that will increase the conductivity of the water to varying degrees. For people who are just starting out with their very first experiments on the kitchen table, baking soda is fine. But baking soda is also has a property where the voltage where you begin where the current begins to avalanche, and where you start to begin producing gases is at a higher threshold than with some of the more caustic solutions like sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide. So if this is your first experiment, and you want to play around at the kitchen table with something that's fairly safe and watch bubbles come up, that's great. But if you're looking to put a cell into production use, then you want to have something more like sodium hydroxide, which is very commonly available at hardware stores as Robic drain opener crystals, or potassium hydroxide. Now, I personally use potassium hydroxide for the simple reason that when the water vapor leaves the surface of the electrolyzer, it does not carry with it potassium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide will come out in part with the water vapor and be consumed in the engine and deteriorate the aluminum surfaces inside the engine and shorten your engine life. There is no way possible to filter out all of the sodium hydroxide to prevent this. Even potassium hydroxide. In the long term, I ultimately don't want to see electrolyzers. As Larry said, this is an interim. This is an interim technology that is getting us from point A to point B. But ultimately, I want to see hydrogen electrolysis take place with a dry cell. And a dry cell is a cell where the metallic plates are electrically insulated from the solution, with as thin a membrane as you possibly can and as high a voltage as you possibly can to eventually bring the water to catastrophic dielectric failure and water fracture into hydrogen and oxygen components. Professor, you've been very quiet.
He's
writing this.
I know, he's right. He's a smart one.
He's taking a lot of notes here. But I want to know, Professor, where does academia stand on the movement that we have going here? I mean, are we a bunch of crackpots or
Yeah.
Oh boy, here we go.
Let me tell you, I can only speak out of honesty. That's all I can speak out of. Okay? Now, I am here to sit on the back row and learn from you. But now that you've asked the question, I am here for one reason. Academia says you're crackpots.
Yeah. I know.
But I'm just like some of you fellers. I have had countless people tell me it works.
That's it.
Now, I don't know what's right.
It's like the bumblebee, isn't it?
You know, I finally figured out what I am. I'm a redneck scientist. I guess I finally figured out what I am. I'm still on my home farm and outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm a college professor. But when I'm not a college professor and I'm out with my cows and riding tractors and thinking about this stuff. Now, let me give you a little bit of my history. So again, I'm being honest. I'm here to learn. And I wrote down 3 objectives on the airplane this morning. I want a kit that works. Step 1, step 2, step 3. I don't want 100 things to do. I want you to give me a kit that works. I want somebody to come up during this after the presentation and says, I have done it timeless. What I keep hearing is what I've heard you say. It works a time or two, and then it don't work anymore. So I'm trying to figure that out today. And the other thing is, I want a person that I can go to a website and refer to other people. Now, let me give you a little bit of my history and tell you where I'm coming from. And again, I'm being honest with you. Ira Nestle out of Davenport, Iowa, come to me 20-something years ago with this system. Because I've been working with hydrogen since the late 70s. And he says, I want you to test my system. He says, I'm getting an increase in mileage. Well, he eventually came down and put it on, and I took it over to the college motor pool, and I did get a 100% reduction in hydrocarbons. But I never did get a gain in mileage. So I put it aside. Matter of fact, I even put it on some vehicles. I put it on some race vehicles. And another thing I've heard you discuss today, and I'm kind of in this feller's court as opposed to yours on this, a little did as much as a lot. We had one of our Nestle's little units to put out a little bit, and we built a unit to put out 10 times as much, and it didn't reduce the hydrocarbons anymore. So the amount in our research didn't matter. So that's another thing I know. Well, like I said, I set this. I deal with pure hydrogen. My whole goal is to run engines off nothing but sun and water. So I'm on a different wavelength than y'all.
That's it.
And if you want to hear about that later, you can hear about it.
We're on board with you as long as we don't have to drive up to a pump to buy it.
We're not trying to.
As long as we can make that on demand, we're all behind you.
Well, I can tell you about that later. But anyway,
Tell you about that later.
so about 6 months ago, I run into this fella. He said, did you hear about the hydrogen assist fuel cell? So I went on the computer, I looked at it, and the thing that the fella said is what y'all been saying, you've got to adjust the computer to make it work. So I bought a system, paid $1,000 for it, paid $600 to get it installed by a professional installer. I'm sorry, I still didn't get an increase.